Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Audit and Standards Committee. As we have people in the room not familiar with the fire drill, I will read it out. Although it's not expected, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside Lloyd's Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door which you entered the room or by the fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Please make sure that all mobile phones are turned off or set to silent, as this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube and will be available on the Council's website for viewing later. Moving on to item number 2, apologies. I'm aware of apologies from Councillor Phillips, Councillor Cooper, who's being substituted by Councillor Harbison, Councillor Hartshorn, who's being substituted by Councillor Hammersley, and Councillor Kovacevic, who's been substituted by Councillor Brown. And are we aware of any more? Item number 3, the minutes of the previous meeting. Is everybody happy that I sign those as an accurate recording of the meeting? Item number 4, declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any interest of those not published? Item number 5. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Not a regular member of this panel. My interests are as declared in the Council's full schedule.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Public consultation. I've been made aware of the fact that we have public speakers on items 6, 7, 8 and 9, which is Mr Smith and Councillor Condacor, and Councillor Condacor also wishes to speak on item number 10. Moving on to item number 6, which is the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000, and I'll hand over to Director Richardson to present the report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is the result of a 3-yearly inspection that is undertaken by the Investigatory Powers Commissioner every 3 years, and we receive a report as a result. You have at Appendix 1 a copy of the report. It has been redacted at the request of the Commissioner, just to delete the name of the inspector that was involved. And then at Appendix 2, arising from the report, there is a recommended changed policy. It's effectively a streamlined version of the previous policy with some flow charts, which the inspector was particularly keen that we put in. And the only other thing to say, Chair, 2 things really. One, the inspector asked us to revise and update the schedule that we hold of previous inspections that we had. The last one was, in fact, in 2010, I believe, and because of our retention policy, he asked us to cleanse that. So we now have a schedule of inspections which is completely blank. And secondly, Chair, as is always the case, the inspector also noted that with churn of personnel, amongst other things, that we will need to redo the training for authorisation for those officers who are, as part of the policy, authorised to approve covert surveillance, as well as those officers who would be investigating officers who would then have to make that request. So we will be organising that as part of these arrangements as well. I think it's all set out in the report and in the appendices, Chair. I'm happy to take questions.
I believe that we have 2 public speakers on this. Mr Smith.
Given the serious nature of this covert surveillance legislation, my first concerns are the executive and the cabinet of this council are completely unqualified to implement this policy, given the serious breaches of its own standards, by allowing cabinet members to submit statements by non-existent residents, and on the back of this fictitious letter allowing Mr Croft to slander and insult members of the public and the good work that the Nuneaton and Bedworth Community Association have done for the residents of the Nuneaton and Bedworth, after which it was brought to the attention of the executives by email and in the council chamber by myself. I have been threatened with exclusion and legal action in an attempt by the executive and cabinet to cover up their devious and criminal behaviour. Given the serious nature of the Covert Human Intelligence Act update, it is clear that the Nuneaton and Bedworth executive and cabinet cannot be trusted to run or oversee any covert surveillance investigations. I therefore submit that the executive and the cabinet relinquish any of its covert surveillance powers until the aforementioned issues are resolved. Thank you.
Councillor Condical.
Thank you, Chair. Happy New Year, panel. This comes up quite regularly, but this is the first time we've had a more detailed report on the covert surveillance and the issue that people keep asking questions about the fly tipping cameras, which seem to be in that sort of grey area as to whether it's covert or not covert. So it would be useful to get some clarity on that, because the other thing is we haven't used any surveillance powers according to these reports, when actually that's probably an outlier that occasionally maybe we do, particularly for the large levels of fly tipping. And it would be useful to, I mean, for the overt cameras, we get an annual report, I believe, telling us how many people have been caught in the town centre, etc. But I say I want to know really where the fly tipping fits in with this. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just clarify a point? That the powers to delegate the covert surveillance is not a power that the Cabinet is responsible for. It's a power of the Chief Executive and other directors.
Yes, Chair, it's an operational matter. As I've mentioned before, the Chief Executive and directors and senior officers are all trained on the powers, the purposes of the Act, the policy, and how to go about undertaking covert surveillance. And I should say, Chair, and it's clearly set out anyway, nothing can happen in terms of covert surveillance without the authorisation being approved by a magistrate as well, which was one of the changes that was brought in 2011. Do you want me to deal with Councillor Kandalka's point as well, Chair, whilst I've got the speaker on? The fundamental difference between, in terms of fly tipping, between covert and overt surveillance is whether or not it is actually done covertly. So, if it's a camera that is visible, it's clearly filming in a public place, then that would be overt surveillance and it would not require authorisation. If you're using one of these rocks with a camera in it, for example, which some local authorities have used to on hotspots, then of course that may well be, it doesn't necessarily, it depends what you're filming and where, but it may well be covert surveillance. It will depend whether or not you're actually going to get private information as a result of that. So if you're getting vehicle registration plates, things like that, you might well be required to do an authorisation in those circumstances. But by and large, a lot of the fly tipping stuff is overt. It's done overtly for that reason.
Yeah, I say most of the fly tipping has got a warning sign up saying surveillance in operation, so that would be overt surveillance then. The recommendations are that the findings of the findings from the Inspector's Investigative Powers Commission Office be noted as attached in Appendix 1, and that the Council's policy on the use of covert surveillance be approved as attached in Appendix 2. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. It's just actually what Councillor Condical has mentioned in regard to the cameras. So I would like to know how many covert cameras this authority have got, because I know when they were looking at CCTV cameras in regard to the fly tipping, there was things afoot to put in covert cameras. So I'm a little concerned that we're sort of saying, well, no, there isn't any.
I'm sorry, Chair. I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to go and ask the people at the depot. Just to be clear, though, Chair, I didn't say we didn't have any. It's just that we haven't deployed them covertly, necessitating a formal authorisation to do so. I think that's the point I was trying to make. I believe we do have at least one. I'm aware of at least one.
Councillor Beetham.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chair. So just in regards to you said it was more or less a slimlining of... There you go, that should be a bit better. Just in regards to what you said about it's basically a slimline of our current policy, was there any kind of drastic changes or differences? And for example, were the flowcharts implemented basically are what we did anyway in procedure just now in more of a flowchart form?
Yes, Chair. There was a fair bit of duplication in the previous policy, so the inspector wanted that to be simplified, and the flowcharts were a suggestion to make it easier for the user to be able to follow through. I think there was this recognition that those people who use this may well be coming to it for the first time, and it's useful to have that kind of ready reckoner to follow to be able to make sure that you're compliant. I think there's always been quite a concern with covert surveillance that it's very easily done to fall into covert surveillance inadvertently, and I think the flowcharts are there to try and avoid that wherever possible. And just to give an example of that, Chair, if you look at things like screening of social media, the policy makes it clear that looking at social media per se is not covert surveillance, but if you, as a result of that, start screening it on a regular basis, looking for specific sites, following individuals, that then would be classed as covert surveillance. That would necessitate a formal authorisation if, and I say if matters were then to proceed to some form of formal legal process.
Any further questions? Does the recommendations receive a proposer? Councillor Beetham, can we have a seconder? Councillor Tromans. In that case then, all those in favour, we accept the recommendations. That's passed. Moving on to item number 7, which is the briefing note, which Linda will present to us, following on from the questions that were raised at the last Audit and Standards Committee.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, at the meeting on the 8th of November, a number of questions were raised around my annual report, which I wasn't able to answer on the evening. Paragraph 4.1 lists the areas where additional information was requested, and within 4.2, I have gained the information requested, and it rolls over to the following 2.5 pages. And I think that's all I need to say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Mr. Smith, I gather you wish to speak on this note.
Well, there's nothing to scrutinise in this really, but no information.
Mr. Smith, it's actually a briefing note that was raised from questions that were raised at the last committee. It's not a report for scrutiny, it's the answer to the questions that the committee raised.
There's never any information in anything the council put out, nothing of any relevance. You can gain nothing from that. They've done nothing, they've got no staff to do anything. Yeah? There's no information ever in any of your reports.
The answers to the questions were raised at the last committee. Do we have your email address?
This council, as it's been pointed out on a number of occasions, yeah, you still haven't addressed the fact that you're not suitable to do the covert surveillance thing.
Mr. Smith.
You haven't addressed...
Mr. Smith, have you wished to continue to speak on the briefing note? It's a briefing note and it responds to questions that were raised at the last committee. Do you have anything to say in relation to anything in the briefing note? Councillor Condicle.
Chair, there's a few alarming things in this briefing note, particularly on the town centre CCTV renewal being overdue. We clearly have lots of arguments in this chamber about where the antisocial behaviour is in town. We've spent £2 grand on putting studs on a wall. We're going to spend £40,000 ripping out a fountain. And it seems our CCTV upgrade is running late. So we've got no idea what's going on. And we could be spending money in totally the wrong area. Getting the CCTV working is really, really important for our nighttime economy and public safety. And I'm really shocked that we only find out the CCTV upgrade is running late through this briefing note. And I think the scrutiny committee, whichever one is responsible for CCTV, should be having a look at this, getting the data on what we can see at the moment in terms of the ASB and various incidents, and actually working out where we will be when this upgrade happens. So I asked the committee to maybe refer that to an OSC to take this matter up, because I think it is very important. The other really alarming thing is post-project reviews. We've just had a project go horrendously wrong this week as the activity centre in Bedworth has been stalled. We really do need to learn lessons from previous projects, Gresham Road, etc. And we seem to not have a robust system of business plans, checks and balances and scrutiny. And I've got an answer back from my question about the cinema. And they say there's a robust business case for the cinema. I've not seen and do not believe there is a robust business case for cinema. So I think post-project reviews is really important. And an organisation that does not learn from its mistakes is bound to repeat them again and again. And we made mistakes with Gresham Road, we made mistakes with the climbing wall, and a lot of the things and a lot of the staff are still the same. But obviously we can tighten up procedures and learn from those mistakes. If we have a proper procedure of, we said it was going to cost X million, it cost Y million, what went wrong? Were we too optimistic? Did we forget inflation? Did we? And so it is unbelievable that we are now facing these problems. Thank you.
Do you have a response to anything Councillor Condacor has said, Linda?
All I can say with post-project reviews is I understand, and I have been away for some time, but I understand that there is now a new process in place for managing major projects because there are so many. And the director, Dawn Dawson, is now managing that process.
Thank you, Linda. The recommendation is that we note this briefing note. Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you, Chair. In response to Mr Smith, actually, it's in here, it does say from the previous committee meetings for additional information requested, and they're all listed about the COVID grants, counter fraud, CCT, cemeteries, etc., etc. And then from the following 2 or 3 pages, all those questions that were asked at that meeting are all there to be read, and they were answered. The COVID grants reference duplicate payments, £76,000 recovered, cash savings for the counter fraud, CCTV. There is one question I'd like to ask about the cemeteries, actually, because I'm not sure of I understand where the rental income from £5,000 per year for the market value to be increased approximately to 145. I'm not sure the rental, who charges, where it goes, where it is, and how those figures arrived at. So I'm not sure on that one if that could be answered. But other questions which were asked have all been answered. So I'm not sure, Mr Smith, you're saying there's no questions, no answers, they're all there. Thank you, Chair.
Linda, I assume that we would have to get back to Brian on that question. Oh,
Yeah, the only thing I can add is that there is a lease agreement in place, and within that lease agreement, it allows us to increase the rental income from the 5,000 to market value. We've done an internal estimation of what market value is at the moment, and that is what the 145,000 is. But we can't charge them that at the moment until we've got confirmation from the district valuer, and that is still awaited. They're in communication with the district valuer. The district valuer has got an awful lot, a backlog of work because of COVID. So until we've got the district valuer's confirmation of what market value is, we can't charge the additional income.
Director Richards, did you have something to add to that?
Yes, Chair. If I'll answer specifically Councillor Hammersley's question, because it does look a bit odd. When the crematorium was built, it was built on a sort of a lease and a build and lease basis. So the risk was taken by the company that constructed the crematorium. So for a period, I think it was 20 or 25 years, I think it was 25 years, there was a mechanism for the rent to be calculated as a percentage or as a certain amount for each cremation that was undertaken in the premise within the facility. And at the end of that period, the rental value then defaulted to open market value. So about 2, maybe 3 years ago, we tripped over into open market value, and at that time, the district valuer did a calculation. He did an assessment of what he thought the market value should be, which is the 145,000 that you see before you. And that now is the subject of formal lease negotiations with the operator in order to agree the open market value. And obviously, if it's not agreed, it'll go to the Lands Tribunal or Valuation Tribunal for formal ratification. So that's ongoing. I think what Linda's also said is it's retrospective. So it will be back calculated to the point where the open market value would kick in. So we'll be looking at up to 3 years, maybe longer of arrears to be paid once the final value is established.
Councillor Beetham.
Brilliant, thank you, Chair. So it's just in regards to the mobile phone section of the part, and I understand if it needs to be a written response from the officer. It's just in regards to 257 mobile phones currently on issue. And from the draft statement accounts in November, we have roughly 600 employees. So for me, that's nearly 50%, which I would have thought is quite a significant amount. And the bit which says elected members, I believe, at least to my knowledge, elected members didn't get given a mobile phone, but instead a amount to go towards their communications and office bill instead as part of the allowances. So it's just to have a further breakdown, perhaps by section of the council, so which areas or which directorates it falls under, and the elected members to see if it's currently active mobile phones as well, or if they're in use, etc. Thank you.
I'm sure we can arrange that, but I know it's a bit
I can arrange that. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I know sometimes it's a bit awkward, but sometimes if we could give an idea of the question that we want to ask, then Linda can arrange for the relevant officer to be in the room, so we can get those answers without having to come back, because the members of public at home don't always see the emailed responses. Councillor Hammers, you want to come?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just one more thing on the 106 monies. I can see that we are waiting for a new CX system because we have been slow in the past in keeping control of 106 monies that are due and have not been collected or handed over. So I just wondered if while we're waiting for that, which is another year maybe, if we can bring these 106 monies up to date, even if it's the old-fashioned way with the papyrus and the quill, using a spreadsheet, etc., etc. So I just wondered if we were on top of 106 money collection, because it does help in the big scheme of things. Thank you, Chair.
Director Richardson, do you want to come in on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. That was, in fact, the recommendation by the audit report, was that this be kept on Content Manager, which is the document management system, so it can be accessed. And obviously kept up to date then, so that there's more than one officer that can access it. So that is already in place. That's been done. I think the point that we were making in response to the sort of wider question was that with the technology refresh of Flare, which is the current system, which can't do what we wanted to do, the CX system will facilitate the ability to be able to do that and have live monitoring as well. So it'll also then improve the data gathering, also the accuracy of that data.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on something that Councillor Hammersley's just said, I mean, I do recognise that there's been a more assiduous focus on Section 106 investigations and collections in the last year or so. Certainly my ward's benefited from some new play equipment in the park at Kersley directly as a result of, you know, the fact that we've put more focus into that since last year. But one other thing that I would like to ask, I wasn't at the last meeting, so I'm substituting. The CCTV system that we've got is currently operational, isn't it? It's not completely broken and non-operational.
As far as I'm aware, Chair, yes, it's fully functional. It's just that some of the cameras are elderly and need to be upgraded. I know that we were looking at wireless as an option as well. So there's a sort of technology refresh that's been running behind the scenes, but the system is up and running, yes.
Thank you, Chair. So to come back on that then, to just take that in, so actually all that's happened here is that we've just recognised that the upgrade has been delayed, and the fact is the system's working, and so it would be wrong to accuse us of having failed to provide proper protection, for example, wouldn't it?
Yeah, the purpose of the original report at the last committee was to check that the systems and the procedures were actually correct and in place for using the system. Do we have any further questions? Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. If I go on the CCTV, although it said it's overrun, I'd like to know why it's overrun. Is it a contractor issue? Is it an issue ourselves? So I presume that'd have to be a written response. In terms of the cemeteries, now I'm aware it's not cemeteries, it's actually the crematorium. Can I suggest we change the heading to that, because it doesn't make much sense otherwise. But I would like an update into where we are with the burial land. Looking for burial land within the borough. It says it's underway. Now I'm aware that's been underway for two years or more, so I think, you know, a more definite date would be useful for the residents of the borough. And in terms of the post-project reviews, yes, things have gone wrong there, and I think maybe it might be useful for this committee to look at that in more detail, to see what lessons we can learn as a standards committee and an audit committee to keep our eye on the ball.
Linda, do you want to deal with Councillor Shepherd's first 2 points?
Yeah, I actually don't have the answers to those. I don't know why it's overrun. And as far as I'm aware, they are still actively looking for burial land, but I don't know what timescales there are, if any, on that. So I'll have to respond via email.
Director Richardson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll try and deal with the last point about post-project reviews, just to pick up the point Linda made earlier in connection with the updated process that's in place. Vicky and I, along with Brent, formed the strategic board, which reviews all business cases and all post-project reviews as part of a much more comprehensive process that's been put in place. What I was thinking, Chair, I mean, if the committee wanted to review that, then perhaps we should bring a report back, setting out the arrangements, the structures, and how it works, so that you can see it is very rigorous. And I should say, in part, I mean, it came out of the LGA peer review as something that was recommended. It's also something that we've had to do because of the government grant awards that we've received, and there's a fairly prescriptive governance process that has to be in place for managing those funds, but by definition all funds should be managed in the same way. So we've applied that overarching principle to all major schemes, major projects, both capital and revenue. So it is something that you could have a report on, Chair, I'm sure.
Councillor Hammersley then. Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you, Chair. Just on CCTV, I know we keep going back to it, but recently we've had some extra funding for, I think, although I stand corrected, town centre funding of some description that has gave us extra money to bring these cameras up to standard, and so that they can be monitored 24 hours a day. Now, I've had various meetings locally with the local constabulary about how the council can help with antisocial behaviour in the town. And the biggest thing that they could tell us was CCTV for the local constabulary would do them the biggest favour ever, because they could then react to any behaviour, antisocial behaviour in and around town centres, where not just Bedworth but Nuneaton are from as well. So this funding was made available so that cameras can be monitored 24/7, so which is a plus for the local police. Thank you, Chair.
No problem, Councillor Hammersley. I understand what you're saying there, but the remit of this committee is to look at the procedure around it. I understand what you're saying, but we're here to look at the procedure around the cameras and to make sure that the policies we have for monitoring them is done correctly. As to the implementation of the funding, I think that's something for the Business Overview and Scrutiny Committee to take up, and Cabinet. Councillor Chomans.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say I'm very happy to make a formal proposal, if there's a seconder, to bring forward the report that Director Richardson suggested.
I'm happy to second that from the Chair. I think it would be handy for the committee to understand how that process works and what goes through with the business cases, so I'm quite happy to second that. Are we in favour of that report being brought forward? Yeah, that's carried. Do we have any other questions on the main report? In that case then, can I receive a proposer that the changes, that the briefing note is noted? Councillor, and the post-project review is brought before us. Councillor Beetham to propose that. Councillor Brown, you're happy to second that? All those in favour? That's carried. Moving forward, item number 8, the internal audit plan. I'll hand over to Linda again to go through the proposed changes to the internal audit plan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the internal audit plan, which is set out at Appendix A to my report, was approved by committee in March 2022. And that plan included just a single audit, which was entitled Council-Wide Ranging Review of the Purchase of Goods and Services and the Operation of Relevant Systems and Controls. When that was looked at in more detail, the scope was very diverse and it was just impossible to look at it as a single review, so it had to be split into 4 areas: accounts payable, fuel cards, corporate credit cards, and housing repairs and stock control. So that has developed a lot more work than was originally planned when the plan was approved. As well as that, internal audit resources have been quite scarce. I've been absent. I didn't actually come back until November of last year. So in my absence, although there was somebody there managing the team, the internal auditor had to do some of the work that I would do where you needed an internal audit background, such as checking reports, checking working papers, agreeing the scope, making sure key risks are being identified. So in light of that, it's quite clear now that the approved plan will not be achievable by the end of this financial year. So at paragraph 4.3, I'm proposing that we have some audits deferred to next year. The first item, creditors, that doesn't need to be deferred because it's actually been completed as part of the accounts payable audit, as I mentioned previously. So there will be 5: customer feedback, electoral services, general ledger, leaseholder management and licensing. I propose that they be deferred. The reason why I'm making that proposal is in the second column of the table, and we'll give priority to these. If you do approve it, we will give priority to these in the next financial year. And I can confirm that all the high risk areas, the annual audits that we do, all follow-up reviews, they're all on target and they will all be completed. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. We have public speakers on this item again. Mr. Smith.
I think that sums it up really, doesn't it? You can't get ahead of no one could audit this lot. It's shocking. Every time I come to these meetings, you turn me off. Very nice. And like I say, you got no. That just proves the standards of this council. You know what I mean? You just silence any criticism about working with the public, yeah, and getting this council back on track. It's absolutely shocking. There's absolutely. Well, it says no audit. No, you ain't got this staff. You ain't got that staff. The reason you can't get staff is because the shocking way this place is run by the people running it, not the people working in it. It's a lot of very good people. Yeah, good staff in this place, but yous lot are absolutely shocking. Yeah, all you've talked about all night is money. I'll see you too. There you go. Sums it up. Sums it up. No standards, as I alluded to in the first speech.
Sums what up?
Yeah.
Sums what up?
No standards. You can't police yourself.
Sums what up? What did I just sum up? I acknowledge that Councillor Hammersley's got a question to ask. Councillor Condicle.
Sorry, I didn't hear it. Sorry? You have to speak up. You turn it down when I'm in here.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very concerned about what's going on in this council with the major projects, and I think the internal audit should be really focused, instead of some of these things that are got high assurance already, the actual major £30 million projects. We have a massive problem, and we've just cancelled, halted one of our major projects, and most of the other ones seem to be in serious trouble. And I think we need an emergency audit of what's going on with these projects. Second thing I think the auditors need to look at is planning. I have today found out that the planning permission for the mobile phone mast in Wellington has been approved without the item going to committee. It was supposed to go to committee because we had more than 5 objectors, and it was just approved without it going to committee. This is outrageous for the residents of Wellington. I've also found out that the planning application Eastborough Way had a faulty decision notice issued, which was garbled between the various conditions of 2 different versions of the application. So I do ask that the audit committee also look at the planning department, the issuing of decision notices, and the things being approved without them going to planning committee, because that is truly outrageous. Thank you, Chair.
As I've just clarified, Councillor Condicle, if you'd like to put those suggestions into a work suggestion form, it will go to the relevant committee to be looked at. It's not really for the procedures or the running of the council.
Chair, if with respect, I think the internal auditors should be looking at the major projects, and the internal auditors should be looking at the issue of planning decision notices. If they're wrong, that's a procedural thing rather than a thing for an audit overview and scrutiny.
If you want to put that down in a work suggestion form, we can look at where it goes to and we can move it forward and put it into a plan somewhere so it will get looked at. Councillor Hammersley, I gather you wanted to come in.
Thank you. Mr Smith, if you wish to speak, I very politely just put my hand up. That's all I did. You can do the same, you know, to ask a question, if you wish. I do give you the time to speak. I'm not being disrespectful. So, going back to this, Chair, this has been under surveillance for some time, and now we are taking action to find out all the weaknesses in the council, and doing that we're reviewing everything, and at this stage is finding out where our weaknesses are and the weakness of the past prior to us coming in, but I won't blame anybody for the past, but it all starts there. So assessing where the faults are and putting them right is now the main priority of this council, which won't happen overnight, but it is under process at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Beetham.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. Just because yourself, Linda, were not with us for some time, that wasn't the case that no internal audits were being done. Can we just clarify that? Because I'm pretty sure that I've had sight of it in the, this committee, and so would the public. So, thank you.
No problem, Councillor Beetham. Thank you for your reassurance. Does anybody else have any further questions? In that case, then, the recommendation is that we approve the proposed changes to the internal audit plan set out at Appendix A in the agenda. Does that perceive a proposer? Councillor Hammersley. Seconder? You have to second that, Councillor Beetham? All those in favour that we approve the changes? And that's carried. Item 9. Again over to Linda to present the review of the risk management policy and strategy moving forward.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've had a risk management policy and strategy document in place for a number of years now, and it was last reviewed in November 2021. So I did agree with the Chair that although a further review wasn't necessary at this point in time, to ensure that reporting lines, roles and responsibilities were quite clear, that we would carry out a review now, which is what we've done. There have been very few areas that need to be updated. They're all highlighted in the report, and apart from the initial ones, which are changes to date, document control, all of the changes are on pages 54, 55 and 56. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Trowman, you indicated you wanted to...
Thank you, Chair. I didn't compare it with the previous version, but it looks very similar and very similar to the one before that. As Linda said, this is a long-standing document of the council. I think that I'd like to request that before the review is completed at the end of this year, looking forward about 11 months, it would be nice, I think, for this committee to just take a little bit of extra time. I know there's a fair bit in the work programme, but just to say, actually, we're going to look at what's on page 52 in your pack, which is the levels of materiality. We're deciding whether stuff's major, serious, moderate or low. I think, you know, with inflation over the last few years, because these haven't been changed, we might want to revisit some of those numbers. We might also want to just consider the harm threshold and whether we escalate some of those. But I think, it would be proper to have a debate, I think, before the next review on that particular matrix that's in there on page 52.
Just before I go to the public speakers, I think, if I'm right, Linda's bringing... I think at the next committee meeting, Linda's bringing some things forward, and also the strategic risk register as well will come along for us to have a look at. So whether we can incorporate some of what you've just suggested in amongst that. Yeah.
Yes, Chair. Yeah, the strategic risk register will be brought to the March meeting along with the proposed internal audit plan for 2023-24. So it will give committee members an opportunity to make changes to the proposed plan from the information that's in the strategic risk register.
We'll go back to the public speakers. Mr. Smith.
Right. If the risk assessments conducted with the amount of information the general public gets, I can't see how it can be done efficiently. Yeah. In fairness to Mr. Gore, yeah, if he has as much information as us, yeah, well, there ain't no risk because there's no information in any of the reports. You just talk, well, you talk like a board of directors. Who are you actually representing here? Could anyone tell me? What corporation are you representing? Because you don't speak about anything about the residents. All you're talking about is corporate issues.
That's because this is a review of the risk management policy. This isn't a review of the risks, and the information provided to Mr. Gall is the information he asks officers for. We're actually just here. This document reviews the policy that's in place to review the risks. It's not to look at the individual risks.
I asked the question. What corporation are you representing? I haven't heard you mention the residents once this evening. Not once. All you talk about is corporate interests, which are not in the interest of anyone in the borough, because we're losing millions. Every project you've undertaken
Mr. Smith,
in the past 2 decades has gone pear-shaped.
Are we talking about the report that's in front of us that we're
The
here
risk
to discuss?
to us is we're going to go bankrupt. And it's the people of this borough that will have to pay the bill,
talking about
not you lot.
Right,
Put your houses up. Put your houses up
we're
in security.
We're talking about the agenda that's
for your
on here
decisions.
tonight. Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you, Chair. You're right that this is the procedural bit of then next meeting we get to look at the risk register. But we have some fundamental problems in this council actually getting to notice what risks are coming up because of the hype about all these projects, etc. And we have very poor visibility of what's going on. So in order to facilitate producing a risk register, the first thing you need to know is a really good picture of where you are. And you look at things, and I'm going to take it as an example again, the Bedworth Leisure Centre. We did not know how that project was going on because there wasn't regular updates with actual real financial information. There was just this spin, it's all going okay. And the way that I'm excluded from being a member, and my group from being a member of the Audit Standards, means that we do not get visibility and ability to adapt or propose stuff for the risk register as other groups do. And this is a serious governance issue. And I think that the big risk of this council is how it's managed with a cabinet system. And I think we need to move to a committee system. So actually the risk register and everything else is done far more cross-party rather than the controlling group effectively says what the risk register is. That just does not work, and we are in serious danger financially from all the money we're borrowing and the poor visibility of projects. We have a massive risk profile coming ahead, and the risk register so far has been useless. Thank you, Chair.
I've just clarified something, but if you have a proposal to put something onto the risk register, you are more than welcome to email it in with that proposal, and it will go to the relevant OSP to be discussed as to whether it should be added to the risk register. So you can actually make a suggestion for something to go on. And I'm more than happy for you to copy me into that email when you send it to make sure it gets a response. Councillor Tromans.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm wondering what people at home must be thinking of this meeting. It does seem that there are councillors who represent residents who go through a formal democratic process to be elected. They don't just wander in off the street and spout not incoherently, as one of the speakers has done tonight. We all seem over here, whatever party we're from, to be discussing the business of the council and trying to move things forward in a positive way that is for the benefit of residents. We're not doing that in a way that, and I have to agree with one thing Councillor Condacourt said about it's very hard for people to see what's going on because of all the noise. Yeah, it is. And when people are deliberately misled time and time again by things tonight like, oh, the project's been cancelled for the Bedworth Leisure Centre. No, it hasn't been cancelled, as well the councillor knows. So why deliberately mislead people to say it has? To say all the other projects are in massive trouble and whatever. All projects everywhere for every organisation are probably under some pressure because of inflation and supply chain issues and a whole bunch of other stuff. We're far from unique, but to say that they're all in desperate trouble is completely ridiculous. I mean, no wonder, it's difficult for people to get to the bottom of things if we have people coming in babbling incoherently on one hand and a councillor who's deliberately misleading people on the other. And the answer, the answer without shouting out, yeah, you have. Though I've just cited the two factual statements that you've misled people on tonight. You see, Councillor Condacourt, this is the difference. You'll always find a problem. Nothing is good because if you're not included in making the decisions, even though you don't warrant that because the democratic process has said your group is only 2 people, then everything has to be wrong. Everything has to be slagged off. Everything has to be misrepresented. Everything has to be rubbish or whatever. Now, there's problems enough for every authority to deal with. If I can just finish, Chair. There's problems enough for every local authority to deal with. The difference is everyone over here, whatever party we're from, is trying to sort it out and make the best for the residents, not just, without any suggestions, just criticise all the time. Thank you, Chair.
I don't think it's warranted.
If you wish to put a complaint in.
That is a waste of time, you know that.
Councillor Shepherd.
I did raise a point of order in respect to, I don't think Councillor Trowans was actually speaking to the report, and I do have serious concerns about shouting across the chamber.
I do apologise, I didn't hear you shout point of order. But, language, as I've said before, is important, and the use of words is important. The difference between cancelled and delayed is a difference. Do we have anybody else with any further questions? Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you, Chair. Risk assessment. If I was Paul McKenna or Mystic Meg, you wouldn't need to do this because I could see into the future and I would be able to tell you what is going to happen. But we can't see into the future. So we are looking to events which may happen. So these events which may happen in the future, we are trying to foresee and be ready in case they do happen. So risk assessment, it will always be polished every year. Things will change every year and things will occur every year which nobody has ever thought of. Very difficult to risk assess the future unless you're Paul McKenna or Mystic Meg. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Beetham.
Brilliant, thank you, Chair. Just in regards to one of the comments which was made tonight, and just some clarity for myself and my residents, whoever is watching. In regards to a risk register, it says that it's a combination to identify risks between colleagues, stakeholders, members, contractors, partners, insurance brokers, insurance risk advisors and external auditors, and then trends, etc. So could it be said that the council leadership, for example, are not in direct control of what is on or off a risk register. They are just part of many conversations that have had to form a effective risk register.
Councillor Richardson, do you...
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think, as Councillor Beetham says, there's a number of stakeholders that feed into the risk register, and the risk register is very much that. And as Councillor Hammersley has aptly said, if we all had a crystal ball, we probably wouldn't need to do this process. But it is about trying to spot trends and have a process in place to be able to manage the things that you are foreseeable. Not everything is foreseeable, and nobody expected Vladimir Putin to invade the Ukraine and the aftermath of that. Certainly not in 2019 when a lot of these projects were being brought together. So clearly our risk register didn't include it. Now, Mystic maybe would have put it in, but unfortunately she doesn't work for the council.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Director Richardson just summarised almost exactly what points I want to make, which was that in January 2019, 2020, we didn't expect to be working from home in March due to COVID. February last year, nobody expected a madman in Russia to invade Ukraine. All of these things have pushed up materials costs, labour costs and things worldwide. These projects were planned before those events happened. And councils around the country, private companies around the country are having to reevaluate and reassess projects that have either undertaken in progress and decide how best to take them forwards. We're not unique in this, and the fact that we're in this position does not mean that this council is badly managed or badly run. The risk register is there for a purpose, and it's only right that we review it regularly and update it to take into account the situation we're in now. But we cannot crystal ball gaze into the future about what might happen next. We just have to deal with the situation as it is. Thank you.
Any other speakers on this matter? Therefore, the recommendations of this report is that the revised risk management policy and strategy document at Appendix A be approved, and that a recommendation be made to Council that the Constitution be updated accordingly. Does that receive a proposer? Councillor Beetham. A seconder? Councillor Hammersley. All those in favour? That's carried. Item 10. I shall hand over to Director Summerfield to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. The external audit for 21-22 is currently underway. It started in November. It is progressing. We are having a lot of liaison with the external auditors. Will and Laurelyn from Grant Thornton are here to actually present their progress report to give everybody an update as to where we are and how the audit's going. It is continuing at the moment. So can I pass across, Chair? Is that okay? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to take the report as read and not go into too much detail, but the high-level messages from this report are that, as Director Summerfield said, our audit is currently ongoing. We haven't concluded our work in any sort of significant areas, and so that's why you're looking at a progress report rather than a draft or an interim audit findings report. We are still aiming to be done substantively by the end of the month. And that still feels realistic at this point, but obviously, as with all external audits, that is subject to us not finding anything significant that kind of throws a spanner in the works. We have not yet commenced the value for money work for the 21-22 financial year. That will follow shortly, and we would plan to report on that sort of by March-April time. But that's in line with the timetables we're required to report under, as we have to issue the value for money report within 3 months of signing the audit opinion for this year. The only other thing that I did want to just make sure that members were aware of is that we have received various bits of information from members of the public that we will be taking into consideration as part of the work that we do. So it may be that we very slightly change our planned audit procedures as a result of that, but we're still working through that at this point in time. I don't think we see it having any significant impact on the audit work, and we don't see it causing us any delays at this point. So unless anybody has any questions, that was all I was planning to say.
Councillor Condicle.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I think these auditors are very expensive people. We should have had this item first on the agenda rather than having an hour watching us. A few things. I have made representations to the auditor over the council paying legal expenses for Councillor Claire Golby's legal costs, which I was told were going to be paid by the council's insurance, but it seems a taxpayer is picking up her personal effective legal costs over the defamation matter. I want to raise that publicly so it's on the record. Secondly, in this paperwork, it talks about 60 councils at risk of running out of money. This is particularly relevant to this council as it's undertaking a very large amount of big projects which are, as Councillor Troman tries to argue, not cancelled. But if the project costs £36 million and you've got £27 million, you cannot do the project. And it is interesting how much of the expenditure was actually in the last financial year, or how much was contracts that have already been signed, like the hotel. We still don't know exactly the cost of the hotel, and there's a lack of transparency. But the hotel was started, I believe, in 2021-22 in terms of the early work. And without being able to know what all the different projects are going to cost, it's very hard for the public to object to the accounts because we haven't got a medium-term financial plan. We don't know what the full cost of the hotel is, for example. We only know what happened in that financial year, and that's obviously the only early year. So it'd be useful if the auditors could clarify if they believe we're already in the 60 that are at risk of running out of money, and what the consideration is for halting various projects because we haven't got the funds to do them. And the other matter, which also ties in with the audit, is that quite a lot of projects have been now funded by Section 106 money, and the leisure centre plan was being funded by the money from houses that haven't even got plan permission and may never be built, like Arby Lawns. That was paying for the Bermuda Leisure Centre, the Bedworth Leisure Centre, and those houses may never be built the way the economy is going. So I hope the auditors will have a look, particularly at the longer multi-year contracts, to see which ones we're actually already spending money on. Thank you, Chair.
Have you got any responses, Vicky?
Thank you. Councillor Condicle, we, as a council, we haven't recently published a medium-term financial plan for capital. We have for revenue, but not for capital. And what we're going to do in February, as the budget part of the budget round, there will be at least a 3-year project plan that will show exactly what we've spent, what we initially budgeted to spend, how that's going to be phased over the 3 to 5 year plan as well. So that will be part of the budget round in February. That's already agreed. Thank you.
I think also from our point of view, I would say that you're not one of the highest risk councils. I would probably say that you're not within that 60 that's reported in the appendices to this report. The various points that have been discussed tonight around project management will be things that we are considering as part of our value for money work, looking at significant capital projects and how they are managed and how they're monitored and reported is something that we've already got sort of procedures planned to consider. So we'll report back to the committee once that work is done. As always with external audit, the work that we do is very backward looking, so we haven't necessarily got the answers for you right now, but we will have a look at it.
Councillor Beetham, I gather you have a question.
Brilliant, thank you, Chair. First of all, it's good to hear that members of the public have submitted information to yourselves and that's being looked at seriously. I've got 2 questions, and that's in regards to page 8 of this document, where it says one of the issues and risks is potentially a depreciation policy that's too aggressive. To me, for a council's depreciation policy to be too aggressive, surely that's a better thing. That could just be my misunderstanding of it. I do understand there's a risk previous in that, in regards to it. And then the second one is just out of curiosity under the audit market developments on page 11. It says that 7 of the audits were inspected of Grant Thornton's audits. Just wondered if our audit was part of that 7. That's all.
So the point on the depreciation policy, this is actually a reasonably, I don't want to use the word frequent, but it's becoming more of an issue within local government as councils are trying to sort of make assets last that little bit longer, and they're trying to eke out that little bit more use out of the things that they have spent money on. We are seeing it's more and more common to have assets sitting on the balance sheet sort of fully depreciated, so they're sitting there at sort of nil value financially. So it's not necessarily a problem, and it's not necessarily something that would impact on our audit report. But what it does mean is that the costs of those assets have been recognised too early within the financial statements of the council, and they've hit the general fund a bit too early potentially. So it's just one that we raise a recommendation around to make sure that it's something that is considered regularly and something that is sort of formally reviewed. And then the point around the FRC reviews, no, you were not one of the 7. So Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council is not a large enough entity to be within the population of audits that the FRC consider for their work.
Go to Summerford, you have something to add?
Thank you, Chair. So the depreciation, as Lauren has just mentioned, we are going to have another look at that, the way the depreciation policy is working within the council. But I think it's worth noting that although this is a charge against the general fund initially, this does get then reversed back out again and taken into unusable reserve, so it doesn't actually affect the taxpayer. So although the balance sheet may not be at the right level in terms of the value of the assets, it doesn't actually directly impact the taxpayer because it isn't charged against the taxpayer's money.
Councillor Hammersley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Grant Thornton, they're a large company and they deal with lots of councils up and down the country. So if we don't listen to their recommendations, we may not bother having them at all. But we do. We do. That's what they do. That's what they're good at. And that's what they're good at advising us on and giving us lots of advisories of up-and-comings. As they have said, additional government funding alone won't lead to improvements. Council should focus on improving governance and developing financial stability plans, which we are. We've taken their advice, so we're already doing that. It's not just this council. It is councils up and down the country that have the same financial difficulties. They are expensive, but that's why we pay them. That's why we pay for the best, because we want the best advice. This is their 4th out of 5 years. If we're not happy after 5 years, we will have someone else that does what Grant Thornton do. But if you want the best, you have to pay. So I'm quite happy, more than happy, the advice that they're giving us. They're giving us heads up on things which we can then deal with before it's too late. And another thing with audit committees, they're advising us to have an audit committee required to include at least one independent member, which, if it was Mr. Smith being an independent member on this committee, he would then see and have an insight into how we arrive at these decisions, rather than berate us at most meetings that he does. So I'm more than happy with what Grant Thornton do and the advice that they give us. And there's lots of things here I could go on, which they are giving us forewarn, watch for this, watch for that. But that's why we do it, you know, and that's why we employ them. So thank you, Grant Thornton, for giving us a heads up, okay? And I listen anyway, and I'm sure the rest of the council listen, and I'm sure they would take your advice on the things that you have noted. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have any further questions? In that case, then the recommendation is that we note the progress of this report. Does that receive a proposer? Councillor Chomans, Councillor Brown, you happy to second that? All those in favour? The report is noted, and thank you for your time this evening. With that, we call the meeting to a close because I've not been notified of any other business, and I just will remind members of the committee you should have received an email about an extraordinary meeting on the 31st of January. Thank you for your attendance tonight. We can stop the stream.